Are you ready?
The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions.
I was right.
Let's go!
I am the best.
And here are your hosts, Jessica Town and Rob Lange.
You're a jackass.
Embrace the madness.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the year 2020 has been maybe the toughest in most of our lifetimes. It's been a year of pandemics and quarantines and mask wearing and a lot of stuff that we've really never had to do. But, you know, we all had hoped as September rolled around that at least here in our city, our football team would give us some sort of break of all of this nonsense and crap and everything else. And instead, what they have done is taken 2020, which was already a piece of trash all rolled up together, and they've set it on fire. And that is where we are here for this week's episode of The Madness. Thank you all for tuning in. I am one of your hosts, Rob Lange. Along with me, as always, is Jessica Town. We are brought to you by The Painted Lines. Make sure you're subscribing. And Jess, it starts right away with the comments. Fire Doug, and is there a way we could get Daryl Morey to run the Eagles?
I only agree with the second half of that.
Jess, I don't think any of us really expected the Eagles to win Monday. I don't think we expect.
I did. Stop it.
Okay, sorry.
I always expect them to win.
Yeah, expected them to win. But if you were to tell me that the defense was going to hold Russell Wilson to like 15 yards rushing, that for most of the first half, I mean, they held the Seattle prolific offense down. They had some big stops. I would have told you, well, maybe the Eagles have a shot any other year. But this year, with the anemic offense and the anemic coaching and the anemic skill players and offensive line and quarterback, it's just not in the cards.
My thing is like, I don't know what people do throughout the week. Like, it's quite literally part of my job to talk about the Eagles. So I unfortunately have to like pay more attention and talk about them way more than I would like to in this kind of year. But also part of my job that Sam and I do is we do a pregame show. It's our job to try to get people excited and hyped and ready to go for the Eagles and at least provide a little bit of entertainment. So I am the perfect person for the job because I love to be positive. But at the end of the day, I don't know what kind of stupid juice everybody drinks in between Sundays because it's like we forget that this is just a bad football team. Like everyone stops, like they forget that they convince themselves that they're not a bad football team. And like, you just have to remember week to week that this is just not a good football team right now. Lower your expectations. I don't know what you think is going to happen, but they are not a good football team this year. It happens. It sucks, but it happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I will say, listen, if you've been a fan of the Eagles long enough, you've seen bad football teams. You've seen bad seasons. I think what hits me the most when I watch this team, not that I had an expectation that they were a Super Bowl team, but I had an expectation that they were going to be, competitive, that they were going to be a team that was probably going to get into the playoffs, that they were going to be a team that at least gave you flashes from some young guys and things kind of, they built off of maybe the end of last season where they won those 4 straight, all that kind of stuff. The problem that I have is this. First of all, it's been boring. Secondly, it's been absolutely horrendous to watch. If you watch football like we do, Jess, the Eagles are by far my least favorite football to watch right now. Like, I had more fun watching a couple quarters of RG3 versus the Steelers than I did of the Eagles offense right now. It's that boring. I know you're going to disagree.
I mean, the Jets are worse. They're worse to watch.
But you know what? Whoever's playing them is doing a lot of fun stuff, so you can actually tune in. I mean, like,
Wait, I mean, you say that for the Eagles too.
why does it seem like the Eagles games every week are the worst game of the week? Like, nobody can do anything. I have seen nothing fun from any team this year who has played the Eagles. Just think about it. These games have been brutal.
I mean,
But
watching
here-
DK Metcalf just be a grown man is pretty enjoyable. Honestly, like, I can't be mad. I mean, he's just so good.
yeah,
Listen, I had to read. Did you have to read that comment too, just to clarify where it was? Is that why?
Yeah. Well,
We both were like, yeah.
that's my guy, and he's a big Carson guy too. But let's actually
trailed off and just had to take a second. But either way, I mean, that was the one thing that's kind of the most exciting thing about the game on Sunday was that.
So let's bring some of our guests and the comments that have happened so far. Our biggest fan, maybe of all time, Chris is with us. Thank you, my man. Let's go, man, this time. Another one of our big guys, he's on all the time, is James. James, how are you? I understand you want to fire Doug. We will get to that. Mark Bernstein might be a lot of the Philadelphia area right now. I can't talk birds. I've already had a heart attack. Can't handle another one. I understand. It's fair. Donald, thanks for joining in. The real question, are you ready to be a bad football team for the next 2 years? Which is really what I think, Jess, our show's going to kind of talk about that dynamic a lot more. This is the comment we all had to read twice. If we just bench Carson, we'd go 11-5, according to 95% of the casual fans. We'll talk about that. Like, it's one of those things where, like, if we say the Eagles have these other problems that are big, that means automatically we're not saying that Carson's playing bad. None of us are saying that Carson is playing well. What we are saying is changing him for Jalen Hurts does not solve your offensive line problem, your skill position problem. Outside of Monday night, your defensive problem. There are major holes all over this team. So that's all we're trying to say when we say benching Carson is not.
He's a problem, but he's not the only problem. And
Right.
At this point, it's really just pathetic and lazy of any person claiming to be a football fan or an Eagles fan or a fan of sports in general. It's the laziest thing you could come up with, and it's the only thing that doesn't involve you using your own brain power to formulate an opinion of your own. It's just a lazy take at this point. He's at fault, of course. He's been, garbage this year. I mean, but in the games that they've won and in the games that they have been this close to winning, he's the reason for it. Like, the defense was bad against the Baltimore Ravens. And the only reason that they were even in the game is solely because of Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz didn't lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jim Schwartz and Nathan Gary lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? So he's not the only one. And good quarterback play can mask a lot of other things wrong with an organization. If you think about last season, Carson Wentz is the first quarterback in NFL history to throw for 4,000 yards without a wide receiver going for over 500 yards in the season. So people want to talk about how, so what other things carried the Eagles? Well, last year, Lane Johnson went down. Jason Peters is old. And Brandon Brooks went down. And then he lost Dallas Goedert at one point last year. He lost Zach Ertz at one point briefly with a lacerated kidney. All of these wide receivers go down, and he still somehow pulls this team together to be able to get them to the playoffs. So, again, exactly what you've said before. They get to the playoffs. Oh, nothing needs to change. Everything's well and good. We made the playoffs again. Fine. So good quarterback play can mask a lot of these other BS issues that are going on. The roster is not different than it was last year in week 17 when Carson Wentz was doing what he was doing. The roster is quite literally the exact same. All these holes that we talked about in the offseason that needed to be addressed weren't, and we have the same exact roster from last year. So the roster is not any different. The defense is the exact same and being run the exact same way. The play calling is the exact same. Nothing has changed. But Wentz's poor play just magnifies what's going on instead of masking it. His heroics masked the dysfunction that was going on within the organization on and off the field. But because he's not playing that way right now, everyone's like, oh, well, he's the issue. No. Because if he was playing at a better caliber, no one would be talking about these other issues right now. And clearly, their issues are way bigger than Carson Wentz.
You know, one of the things that I harped on as we went into this season was how disappointed I was with the Eagles' inability to better their roster from a team that squeaked in by the slimmest of margin to the playoffs last year. Okay, they went into this season and said, well, we'll tweak here. We'll spend more money on that defensive line again, which, oh, by the way, looks horrendous because the guy hasn't made a play all year. We're not going to pay attention to the linebackers. And, well, we're going to let Malcolm walk, but we're going to get Jalen Mills, who's been a corner for the last 5 years, to be a safety. And we'll bring Will Parks in. And, oh, we haven't given him any opportunity, but we're going to cut him now too. So this brings us to, I think, Jess, where a crux of our day is going to be here. And listen, at the end of the Sixers season, one of the things I kept saying was, I'm very concerned for the future because the organization is an embarrassment and it's a disgrace. Well, my friends, as we near the end of this season, I'm going to say I am concerned about the Philadelphia Eagles because the organization, the way the organization is being run is an embarrassment and it's a disgrace. You know, where there's smoke, there's fire. There have been a lot of these stories coming out about Jeffrey Lurie being too involved, about Howie Roseman doing things, about tension between Howie Roseman and Doug Peterson, about everybody having, you know, the male dominance, debate within the organization. And the issue at this point is we are allowing, not us, but the organization is allowing non-football guys to make football decisions. And when you do that, it is a recipe for utter disaster, such as a 3-8-1 season in a division that is as bad as your division is, that you should be running away with, having the only coaching staff who was here last year, having the only starting quarterback still playing. And I understand there's been injuries. But once again, you decided that a second-round pick on a quarterback and that free agency money on another defensive tackle was more important than solidifying offensive line depth, getting a safety, maybe bringing in another running back. You know, now the report this week says all you need to know. The scouts, and listen, let me preface this. I'm not here to tell you that Jalen Reagor is a bust. I don't think they're using Jalen Reagor right. I think the kid could be a good quarterback, good player. With all that said, though, when the Eagles drafted, there was a kid from LSU who lit it up in college every big game. And now you watch him in his first year, and he's lighting it up. The scouts all wanted him. You know who didn't want him, Jess?
Howie.
Howie got his way.
Here's the thing. Are you convinced that he would look the same way here that he looks in Minnesota? Because
No.
I am convinced that he would look just like Jalen Reagor here, and Jalen Reagor would look like he does out in Minnesota.
Yeah, listen, I am not convinced that this, because of the dynamic, but my point is the fact that he wasn't drafted here is part of the bigger issue, that Howie Roseman, who as much as he wants to think of himself as a football guy, is not, has way too much power. So you go to the second round. Jess, me and you were screaming about certain names. I know I was on a Jeremy Chin bandwagon for over a month, screaming for this kid. The scouts, every scout in the war room is saying, Jeremy Chin, Jeremy Chin, Jeremy Chin. Howie and possibly Jeffrey, because those guys are thick as thieves, said we're going to go Jalen. Now, what you did there, and listen, Carson Wentz is a professional. And there is a human element to things, but I won't accept the excuse Carson isn't playing well because Jalen's there. I won't accept that excuse, and I don't think that's the reason. But you created an unnecessary turmoil within your organization from the moment you put that pick in. Instead of bettering a position in which, by the way, you just tossed aside your only emotional leader on this team in free agency.
So, I would love for someone to tell me, other than giving him a long-term contract, one thing that the Philadelphia Eagles have done to help support Carson Wentz and build him up and do anything helpful to him. I would love for someone to tell me one thing they did that wasn't actively working against him other than the contract.
Yeah.
I will literally Venmo you $3.
I mean,
you can come up with something valid. I'm very serious. I am
Venmo you, so you could buy 3 things on the McDonald's dollar menu with what Jess is going to Venmo you.
I will literally Venmo someone $3.
Someone's going to come up with shit just so they could get $3.
No, I said it has to be valid. It can't just be a bunch of BS.
Well, let's continue on this.
That's exactly it. They drafted J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. See, that's sarcasm, and I can appreciate that. That's funny, but that's what I'm saying. Other than the contract, they have not done one single thing other than actively work against him.
Well, and that's what I want to talk about. So let's look. First of all, here's your first thing, right? Okay, we all thought Jason Peters coming back, they needed to do that move, right? We're like, okay, Andre Dillard's out. They're gonna, but then they practiced him at right guard for almost the entire time he was here prior to the season. Mm-hmm. We had Trey Thomas on before the season, and Trey literally looked us in the face and said, "This is stupid. Let him go back out and play left guard." Okay, so then or left tackle. So finally they do that. He gets hurt. Shocking. Yeah. Jordan Mailata comes in and plays really well.
Yes.
Really well.
Yes.
Jason Peters comes back, and this is where I think the reports are true. You mean to tell me that Jason Peters should just replace Jordan Mailata with how well Jordan Mailata played? Jason Peters cannot do a thing on a football field right now. Mm-mm. I mean, he is horrendous. And I won't say he's going to go as far as what Donald's saying here, destroying his legacy, because I will remember the good of a Jason Peters. But for this year, stop. It has to stop. Okay? And then Donald adds on, and here is the number one issue with this team. We can bitch about Carson, about Doug, about Jim, about the offensive line, about we can bitch about all that. The number one issue is the bad contracts, and I will add bad drafting, doled out by Howie Roseman. Okay? This is where we are with this team. He has not hit on a draft pick outside of Carson Wentz. Like truly hit on one. I would venture to guess, and someone, maybe Miles Sanders, you can say. But like 2 guys in the last 6 years, 5 years. Think about the last 2 years. Okay, just think about the last 2 years. 2 years ago, Jess, as me and you sat intoxicated at Xfinity Live.
What a time that was.
What a time.
I shattered my phone that night.
You did. Wait a minute. It's time to take advice from Jess's wall, Rob. It's right behind you. Hakuna Matata. Anyway, where was I? Now I'm thinking of Hakuna Matata in my head. I can't even think what the hell I was saying. Oh, yeah. We're sitting at Xfinity Live intoxicated. The Eagles trade up. I'm thinking, hey, D-end here, man. Another D-end. This will be good. Feeling the Montrez Sweat, who, by the way, is playing pretty damn well in Washington. Just going to put that out there. No. They're going to draft Andre Dillard. Oh, this kid he's it, man. He's it. Well, he couldn't get on the field last year. Mm-hmm. And I understand he's hurt this year, but it wasn't like people were thrilled with his play prior to getting hurt. Okay? So that's the first round pick last year. Second round pick. Oh, baby. Here it is. You've been looking at pictures of this man and the physical specimen that he is. DK Metcalf falls into your lap. Was it second round or third round?
He was a second round. Miles Sanders and we had 2 second-round picks.
Yeah.
2, yeah.
But no. Not Howie. Howie's been watching Stanford play, Jess. He's been watching Stanford play. He's been watching J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who doesn't have the amount of receiving yards that DK Metcalf does in 3 career games versus the Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's 2 years ago. Last year, we already talked about the Jefferson Reagor thing. I just think Jefferson's going to be a better player, but regardless, I'm not calling Reagor a bust. But let's go to the second round. My God, all the holes on this roster. And you've got your pick of the litter. You can pick another receiver. You could go with another running back for a 2-headed monster with Miles Sanders. You could get the safety of the future in Jeremy Chin. No. Now's the time to draft your backup quarterback. And I can't believe that I'm still having arguments with people who want to say, well, you had to get a backup quarterback because of the injury history. Okay, you have to get a backup quarterback. Fine.
How many times has Carson Wentz been sacked this year?
What is it, 46 already? 47?
Yeah. How many times has he been hit?
A lot more than that.
It's in the 60s.
Yeah.
Who's the starting quarterback left in the NFC East?
Wait a minute. Say that part one last time.
Who's the only healthy starting quarterback left in the NFC East?
Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is. Yeah.
I was checking. Proceed.
So my point being, though, I want to know.
Wait. How many games did he play last year?
16.
Okay. I'm sorry. I forgot.
You're good. I just want to know this, okay? I want to know how many teams use their second-round pick when they are not a perfectly built team on a backup quarterback and not an instant impact player. And then what happens? Now you are trying to force your second-round pick into certain packages that stink, that do nothing, and then your excuse is, well, we're not doing well on first and second down. We can't really get them rhythm. Well, who's calling the damn plays on first and second down? Like, wait a minute. I want guys to look in the mirror right now, and I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing a bunch of guys who are miserable, who are unhappy, who are angry, but not at the right things, and that is directly from the top. So, in my opinion, very similar to what you saw the Sixers do this year, okay? The Sixers had to get rid of Brett Brown, you know? And I'm not saying the Eagles had to get rid of Doug Peterson, but the Sixers had to make a change of some sort there. And then they didn't fire Elton Brand. They didn't say, hey, you stink, you're out. But what they did is they said, hey, we're going to get you a guy that can really help you, that you can learn this business from. And now there's hope. Here's my issue with the Eagles. Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman, I don't think one goes to the bathroom without the other one walking in with them. They do it all together. They're like teenage girls. Hey, you want to go to the bathroom? Sure. And there go Jeffrey and Howie off to the bathroom never mind. But Jeffrey Lurie, if he wants to stick to his word that a successful team is the most important thing to him, Howie Roseman cannot survive the end of this year. Howie Roseman is the number one problem with this team because the roster that is constructed at this moment is one of the worst rosters that has been here in I can't tell you how long.
The worst, not even at this moment. Week 1, starting the season, it was one of the worst put together rosters I've seen in years. The contracts are terrible. The draft picks are worse. And there's absolutely nothing was addressed that needed help. Like nothing that needed help in January of 2020 was solved before September of 2020. And to me, I just and I know so much of the like I think that the fire Doug Peterson is almost as lazy as putting all of the blame on Carson Wentz for their on the field struggles at this point. Because you and I have talked about this. I've mentioned this to you. Let's think about the Phillies. What did the Phillies do 2 years ago? They finished 500, didn't make the playoffs. They fired Gabe Kapler. Now, I was not a Gabe Kapler fan. However, I was not a fan of him getting fired either. I thought that firing Gabe Kapler while retaining Matt Klentak was an absolute asinine decision. And you can see how, I'm thrilled that Joe Girardi is the manager of the Phillies, but he's one of the best managers in the MLB of the last, 15, 20 years. In my lifetime, he's one of the best managers that has been on multiple teams, and his track record speaks for itself. We were all over the moon when Joe Girardi was hired by the Philadelphia Phillies. But what happened this year? The bullpen still sucked. They were still injured, and they still didn't make the playoffs. In fact, they had to rely on Gabe Kapler's team to lose to even have a shot at making the playoffs.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter who you have in there. We could have friggin' Vince Lombardi out there coaching the Philadelphia Eagles, but if Howie Roseman is still the GM, that doesn't matter.
Well,
the whole fire Doug thing, in my opinion, is equally as lazy because I think has his play calling been absolutely terrible? Of course. I don't know what the heck he's been doing to this point, but you watch the game on Sunday. His receivers get no separation, none at all.
When they do, Carson misses them.
They have balls hit them in the hands and then hit the ground. Let's keep in mind the Eagles lead the league in drops once again this with 29.
Yeah.
Miles Sanders leads all running backs with 8 balls that have hit him directly in the hands and dropped to the ground. Now, again, this is balls that hit them just directly in the hands and hit the ground. This isn't, if they would have reached a little bit harder. Like, we see guys out there making insane catches every Sunday. We see guys go out there and make plays for their quarterbacks. We see guys go out there and be playmakers for once. I couldn't tell you the last time I saw an Eagles, quote, playmaker make a play and I go, damn, that was a good play.
Yeah, it's a great point.
When was the last time that happened? So his receivers aren't getting any separation. He's got mandates from the top to force a backup quarterback who's useless, by the way, into our offense. And I mean, and this is my where I see it. So last year, we talked about this before we came on tonight. Last year, Doug Peterson comes out in his postseason presser and says, I am not firing my coordinators. Mike Groh is not going to be fired. Okay? And everyone had a huge uproar when the next day Mike Groh was history. Well, Doug Peterson didn't pull the trigger there. Howie Roseman did. And then when they formulated this whole offensive coordinator by committee BS, Howie formulated this offensive coordinator by committee BS. So not only is the guy who Doug wanted as his offensive coordinator canned by someone else, he didn't get to decide what's in there. Howie dictates who plays on Sunday. Howie dictates the snap counts. So at this point, I don't know. Doug Peterson is, his hands are tied at this point. And he can only do so much. And I know what he's done with that hasn't been good enough. That's not a question. But the fact that he doesn't get to make any of these selections around him, I don't understand, what else is expected at this point. Like, they have so many issues from the top down that the fact that he can't even select his own offensive coordinator, the whole committee thing is ridiculous. Like
the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Dumbest thing ever. But the fact that he's still not, he doesn't have enough power to run his own team. And I think if you look at it, you can go on Twitter. The one thing that everyone wants to say is, when we talk about Brett Brown, he lost the locker room, right? They're not listening to him. They needed a new voice. That's not the conversation we're having. There's no Doug's lost the locker room. Doug doesn't have the trust of the guys. In fact, everybody has a lot of really positive things to say about Doug. You've got a lot of former players on Twitter defending Doug. He's a hell of a coach. All the things he can do. I'll tell you what you don't have. Anybody anywhere saying anything good about Howie Roseman. And no one's jumping to any sort of defense of Howie Roseman. People are jumping. Torrey Smith, Chris Long, lots of these guys are jumping out to just say, hey, Doug Peterson's a great coach. The Eagles don't want to lose him. Not the same to be said about Howie Roseman.
No. And listen, I am with you on this standpoint. The idea of firing the coach and keeping the GM would be an absolutely that would, to me, be the biggest mistake you can make. That's a bigger mistake than firing both of them. And I'm not even saying that they should fire Doug. But if they were to make a decision to just clean house and let a new GM pick a coach, I can at least somewhat understand that more. No, I can understand that more than keeping Howie firing Doug. Keeping Howie firing Doug should be off the table. Should be absolutely
off the table. Crime.
Now,
he'd be arrested for that.
Yes. Now, I am with Donald here. You need to add an offensive coordinator, but what I think it has to be an offensive coordinator that Doug and you approve of. It can't just be someone that you throw on Doug. So, for example, let's just throw, and I'm just throwing a name out there because I know the name's out there. You get an interview with a Jim Caldwell, right? Very respected NFL offensive guy. Doug's on the interview. The new GM is on the interview because I'm just going to speak this into existence until it happens. And Jeffrey's in the interview. Okay, and they all like him. Well, then great. But if Doug is not crazy about him, then you have to interview somebody else. Maybe it's Mike Kafka in Kansas City, right? Guy's up and coming. Okay, maybe they bring him over and groom him and let him call. But the conversation has to be had with Doug. If you're Jeffrey Lurie, the conversation would be like, Doug, we've mishandled this. Okay, we all need to do some. The whole organization has to do some soul searching. We want you to be a part of this process, but you have to understand that our offense has regressed over the last couple years. It's vanilla. We need to hear a new voice. We need an offensive coordinator that's going to call plays. Now, if Doug then becomes an arrogant person and says, no, I'm calling the plays. And I'm not saying he will, but if he does, well, then I can understand an organization saying, look, we want an offensive coordinator. And I can understand maybe a switch being made, but only if you are going to rebuild the GM role and that role. It cannot just be the coach. It could just be the GM. I'm okay with that, but it cannot just be the coach. That does nothing. You know, for the longest time, and I, you know me, I'll admit when maybe I was mistaken. I question Doug's loyalty to Carson. And I question what Doug thought of Carson. I think what's happening is not so much Doug and Carson rift. Doug's rift with Howie is affecting how he's coaching games. And he just looks, as the report, he seems disinterested at times. Like, there's no logical reason in a 10-point game when you're in field goal range and it's fourth down to not kick the field goal and make it a one-possession game. You know, there's no logical reason for going to two at times where it literally does nothing to help you. Like, it's almost like Doug's going, screw it. These guys want to be jerks. I'm just going to do my thing. And I don't condone it. I don't condone it at all. But
I get it. I would be the same. I would be the exact same.
Let's put it this way. It makes sense. It makes more sense than Doug fell out of love with Carson. You know what I mean?
Or Doug forgot how to design plays and call plays.
Yeah, I still don't understand the lack of rollouts. It boggles my mind. Or that they run the ball twice with Miles Sanders after the first half. Like that, I don't know. And then who knows who's calling the plays, who's putting the running backs in, I don't even know anymore. But it is really, really upsetting. And I got to say, I'm nervous. I'm nervous about the future that looked so bright of this franchise. Now, the good news is I believe Carson Wentz can be fixed. I believe with the right guys around him, Doug can still be a good coach. But I am a firm believer that what you saw in 2017 was a great rapport between Doug and Frank and John. You know, that's the other coach's name that we don't hear about right now. What has Press Taylor done?
Apparently, he's been given a little bit of a play calling duty now for.
Yeah, he's not very good at that.
Well, no, now going for after today.
Wonderful.
Just came out for this, yeah.
Wonderful. Because he has done nothing to help the development of Carson Wentz.
Yeah, no, he's done negative amounts of things.
So
and you know me, I'm not going to. I will never sit here and be like, "Oh, this person needs to be fired." I just personally don't believe in that because that's someone's livelihood. Like, you don't have what right do you have to sit here and tell a person that they deserve to lose their job? Like, I just that's not. So I'm not going to sit here and do that. But there's people that I'm not satisfied with their job performance.
Yes, and Donald, don't. Because the fact is, you know, someone said the other night, Monday night, I'm putting the girls to bed and I said, I'm going to go watch the Eagles. They went at night. And I said, yeah, you know, I said, they stink, but I'm going to watch them. And Ella said, Daddy, why do you watch them even when they stink? And I looked her straight in the face and I went, Ella, it's a sickness that you will have too, that we all will have. Like, people are like, oh, I guess you're going to give your kids a new team to watch. No, they're going to suffer like my ass has suffered. I'm not giving them a new team. Well, that's not what we're doing in this house.
No, it's not what we do.
They're going to deal with it. Luka, damn it, he doesn't know it yet, but he's going to have a miserable life watching the Eagles.
Yep.
Outside of a few good years. It's just what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But no, I think we're both in agreement, Jess, that we believe Howie needs to go. Personally, I think they should be looking at what some of the other teams are doing and doing it sooner rather than later so you can get the ball rolling as far as preparing for next year. But, you know, I guess because they're a game out of first place or whatever the hell it is, you know, they're going to continue to act like they're in this thing, which is the stupidest thing ever.
You know, they're also not. They don't do that. I mean, it was the shock of the century when they fired Chip with one game left. Like, yeah. I was stunned.
Yes.
When that happened, because you know they don't. They're not big on in season job loss.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, there is so much that needs to happen between now and September of 2021. And look, I'm not going to lie to you. There's part of me that was very okay with a national embarrassment on national TV of this organization on Monday. And it's because of what I've said to you in the past, Jess, that they looked at last year, they made the playoffs, they use that as see, we don't have to change anything.
Fine.
You cannot do that now. Like, you're
literally above the fire. It's like, it's fine.
You are going, you know, unless something drastic changes, which won't, you're going to have a top 10 pick in the NFL draft this year. A top 10 pick. And we have to get off of this. They won the Super Bowl 3 years ago. They did, and it was great. But that doesn't mean that we have to just accept everything that's happening now.
Right.
No. Changes have to be made in this organization. And if Jeffrey Lurie wants to be the guy that he tells us that he is, he's got to break ties with people that he may be close to, such as a Howie Roseman.
Yeah, I just think that, to me, I think it's like, so when looking at guys like Doug Peterson, you know, so his rookie year as a head coach, Carson's rookie year, they went 7-9. There were some really, really bad things. There were some really, really good things. Obviously, they addressed those. They came back the next year. Carson Wentz was an MVP candidate. Doug Peterson was a Coach of the Year candidate, and they went and won the Super Bowl with 7 starters on IR and a backup quarterback. That doesn't just happen, right? Then the next year, they have injury problems again, and they somehow finish with a winning record, go to the playoffs, and win a playoff game, and they're one bum-ass Alshon Jeffrey drop away from possibly going back to the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Then last year, when, people we finally get the Nick Foles monkey out of here. I, love Nick Foles, but we get that off of Carson's mind. Doesn't have to worry about him being there anymore. Carson goes out there, plays 16 games. They have even more injuries than the year before and the year before that combined. And they look like they're dead in the water by week 9?
Miami.
Yeah. Ugh, RIP. And Carson leads them on a tear, and they go to the playoffs. And I still firmly believe if he doesn't get cheap shotted out of that game, not only do they win, but they blow the Seahawks out in that game. Firmly believe that. Anyway, so that's what Doug's done since the Super Bowl, right? So he's won a Super Bowl and then gone to the playoffs both of the seasons after the Super Bowl. You don't just fire that guy. Like that to me is stupid. I understand that he's not been good this year, but you don't fire the guy who brought you the first Super Bowl in franchise history and has gone to the playoffs both years after that since for one bad year. You don't just can a guy for that. That's dumb. That's really, really dumb. Like, would you fire Sean Payton after that? No. Did Pete Carroll get fired when that happened? No. And he had Russell Wilson. These, and you don't just do that. Like, that's silly. If the Patriots don't make the playoffs, is Bill Belichick fired? No.
All right.
You had a bad year. It happens. It happens.
You're right. Bad years happen. And if you're going to say that about Carson Wentz, you have to say that about Doug Peterson. I guess my fear is, and I'm not saying, I think I've been clear about this. I am not saying just blatantly fire Doug. Like, that's not my thing is, though, a conversation needs to be had with Doug. And if at that point Doug wants to be a hard ass and say, no, that's not the way I'm going to do it, blah, 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 well, then there's no reason to keep this marriage going because it's already to the point where nothing good's going to come out of it, right? But I don't think that that's who Doug is. If you have a legitimate conversation with Doug, I kind of think maybe he'd be willing, as long as he's a part of the process, to do this. Couple things. Donald, if they clean house totally, no. Jim Schwartz does not survive a clean house. And listen, I understand they played well the other night. But come on, with and I'm not saying this is what Donald's saying, but I've heard a few people say this. Jim Schwartz has been for his entire tenure here. I mean, really, think about it. Like, I don't know what the love affair. Why? Because he's a hard ass. People love him. Like, I mean, he's arrogant. He does the same thing.
Again, but if we're going to continue on to talk about, I know you have an issue with the defense in the Super Bowl game, and I understand that. Tom Brady's also the best quarterback to ever do it and threw for 500 yards. I get that, but we can't act like the Eagles didn't lead the league in takeaways that year and had an absolutely dominant defensive line the entire time. Like, we can't act like those things didn't happen.
Right. But since that day,
sure,
the defense has regressed. The defense has not been good the last.
But you asked what he's done. That I'm telling you, that's what he's done. Like, it's not always been Like, they were the number one defense in the NFL the year they won the Super Bowl.
I have an issue with coaches that will not back down from their system to make it better. And he's that guy. Like, he's going to coach his system. Like, whether it's Nate Gary out there or Ray Lewis as his linebacker, he's going to try and make them do the same things. And that's just stupid. And he has his favorites, right? And look, you can't – I don't think you can do that. Our boy Cali Dream says it. Doug has one more year with an OC, and if that doesn't work, then you start – and I'm with that. But the OC is a huge thing. Like, that's my asterisk. Like, you need to have an OC. This can't happen again where you don't have an offensive coordinator. It can't. Yeah. This is horrendous.
Right. And absolutely. I know Jim has a lot of control over the defensive roster and the guys that they bring in here. But, I mean, it's not just him who doesn't. But we haven't valued a linebacker since I think 1979 was the last time the Eagles drafted a linebacker in the first round. That's not new around here. Like, that's not a Jim Schwartz thing, not valuing linebackers. That's I don't know why that's
I'm talking mostly about the system and not adapting it to whatever your personnel is. That's my issue with Jim Schwartz. And Jess, I'll let you comment on this and I'll let you kind of rebut this. So someone says Doug's not Bill, he's not Pete Carroll. People still are attached to Doug because of the Super Bowl. Like, I want to give you the opportunity because that was your comment to kind of just respond.
I mean, how should I say this? 3 years ago, everyone was regarding him as like the second coming of Jesus Christ because the Eagles won a Super Bowl with Doug Peterson and they had 7 players on IR. So, like, don't try to change the tone now just because, they're struggling. I understand that now, hindsight, looking back on it now, Drew Brees and Sean Payton are who they are. I understand right now who, Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll are. But at the time when those seasons were happening, they weren't what they are now. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So when Drew Brees and Sean Payton win a Super Bowl and then they have a bad season right after, or, a few years following, within, 4 or 5 years, they have a bad season and they don't make the playoffs. People aren't, there were other people to compare them to at that time. That wasn't right now. I'm not saying that. 5 years from now, we don't know what Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz are. Keep in mind, Drew Brees and Sean Payton haven't won a Super Bowl since the one.
Right.
Okay? They've only won the one. They're just a really good duo together.
Yes.
Pete Carroll made, that team made one of the biggest bonehead plays in NFL history.
Yep.
And, they go and have a losing season. He's not fired. He's still there. Okay. So let's not act like, what I just said makes no sense. And, he's not Pete Carroll. Oh, he's not. Of course, no one's Bill Belichick. Okay. But you see my point. That's what I'm saying. It's like, you get a bad year. It happened. We've all had a bad year.
Right. And we're talking about Doug Peterson, and the same goes, and I know that we're definitely on the same page here with Carson Wentz. Let me read you this, okay? 25-year-old quarterback. Record in his 4th year, 6-10. Okay? He throws 26 TDs, 23 interceptions. Who do you know who I'm talking about there?
Oh, wait, say that one more time. I wasn't really listening. I didn't hear you clearly.
I wasn't really listening. We got a sports talk show where we are going
I'm also trying to look something up. So wait, say it one more time.
I'm listening to me. Anyway.
Say it one more time.
Okay. 25-year-old quarterback in his 4th year. He goes 6-10.
Yeah.
He throws 26 touchdowns and 23 interceptions. He has a quarterback rating of 84.1. Not a great year right out of a 4th year. I mean, 4th year, right? That's what everybody keeps saying about Carson. It's year 5. It's year 5. He's got to be better. He's got to be better. He's got to be better. Who's the quarterback that I just read those stats of? Year 4. Huh?
Drew Brees?
It is Peyton Manning. Okay? Year 4. Now, you look at his years before that. He was 3-13 in his first season. Okay. But then 13-3-10. After that year, after that one bad year, Indianapolis didn't give up on him, right? They didn't throw him to the wolves right away. Here's the next X amount of years. 10-6, 12-4, 12-4, 14-2, 12-4, 13-3, 12-4, 14. My point here is that all these guys that, first of all, they don't understand money in football. Carson Wentz is going to be here next year. Carson Wentz could have thrown 0 touchdowns and 150 interceptions, and he was going to be here next year. That's just the way it's going to work because the dead cap hit is not one that they can absorb. That's on that. But take that out of the equation. Carson Wentz has had one bad year. Yes, he had bad moments last year, but he also put a team of practice squad guys on his back, threw for 4,000 yards with no receiver over 500, and I think what was it, 27 touchdowns and 10 picks or 7 picks or something like that. I mean, it was
Something like
I
that.
think he only threw 7 interceptions on the year. Okay, so I don't want to hear that Carson had a bad year last year. I don't want to hear that Carson had a bad year last year. He had bad moments last year. He didn't have a bad year. Okay. Carson is having a terrible year this year. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm as frustrated with his play as any. I am. But you give up on Carson now. Okay. And I forget who we said this about. One of the other franchises. I said, probably Ben Simmons, when everyone talks about trading a Ben Simmons or Joe Embiid. You do that now. What you have just said is we will not be good for 5 years. You totally derail. Carson Wentz can be fixed. He's seeing ghosts out there. He's making bad reads. These are fixable. And for anyone who wants to get rid of him, that is a major mistake. Okay, as our buddy Amadeo says, you cannot give up on Carson. It doesn't make sense literally and financially. And I mean, that's really where I'm at with that. Like, you could criticize the hell out of him this year. You cannot if you want to give up on him, you should just leave being a fan of this team, because that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Dumbest thing I've ever heard. Your comments, Jess.
I mean, I totally agree with you. Like I said before, part of the problem is, when he was playing well last year and he was quite literally putting the team on his back, and he's the reason that they ended up even making the playoffs last year. Because here's the thing, you can elevate the players around you and you can overcome bad play calling. Mm-hmm. When you're playing like garbage, all that stuff's exposed. Yeah. So he's no longer masking the problem. He's actually magnifying it by not playing well. So we had all these same gripes a year ago, but because Carson was playing well, it didn't matter.
Uh-huh.
But now he's not playing well, so something's got to give. I just personally don't think it should be Doug Peterson, and I don't think it should obviously shouldn't be Carson Wentz and won't be Carson Wentz. That's stupid.
And I want to
go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to respond to Chris's question. The reason I'm saying 5 years, I understand we won in Carson's second year, but the team was built at that point. You have so many holes already. Now, by getting rid of Carson, you don't have a franchise quarterback on top of it.
You're starting over.
You're totally starting over. When you drafted Carson Wentz, he was kind of like, all right, we got our quarterback. We've had these veterans, these savvy vets that have been here, right? We brought in an Alshon Jeffrey, but a lot of the team was here, and we're going to push and we're going to go. You don't have that right now. You have nothing but holes. Don't you want to at least keep that quarterback position stabilized? Now, if Carson comes out and does it again next year, same as Doug, then you got to start talking about it. But right. To give up on him right now is a terrible.
Right. We're not going to sit here and act like guys like Phillip Rivers, who is like a conversational potential Hall of Famer, didn't have a 4-12 season. Like, we're not going to act like that didn't happen.
Yeah. I think we found Doug Peterson's biggest. He's just, which
I also don't like. Who cares?
Yeah, I agree. He did it, but I'm not.
But who cares? Because another comment there is, and go back to the Super Bowl, we won because of Frank Reich. Okay, is Frank Reich the one who was leading the team when they could have quite literally given up after they beat the Los Angeles Rams because they lost their MVP candidate franchise quarterback? But no, they didn't. They all still kept playing, and they were all ready to go week in and week out to make sure they could go out and win a damn Super Bowl with 7 starters on IR. 7 starters, not players, starters. Okay? Carson Wentz, Jason Peters, Jordan Hicks, their kicker. Who the heck was their kicker at the time? Caleb Sturgis. No. Yes. No.
At the beginning of that year? At the beginning of the year?
Yeah.
Of the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
It was Sturgis. He got hurt, and
Yes, he was the one on IR.
Yeah.
And there were others. Now now it's escaping me at this point. But they were starters on IR. That doesn't just happen, right? Like with a bad head coach, there's no way that's going as far as it did. And that goes back to my previous point. Say what you want about Frank Reich being the mastermind behind that offense or calling the plays or doing this or doing that or doing whatever. You can say that till you're blue in the face. At the end of the day, there's not been one player who said one bad thing about Doug Peterson. Even idiots like Orlando Scandrick, who want to go out and talk out their ass on ridiculous talk shows and whatnot, never said a bad word about Doug Peterson. Never had one negative thing to say about Doug Peterson. So there's something to be said about, and we talked about this before. I really truly think there's something to be said about the way that these guys always play for Doug Peterson, regardless if they're losing by 30 points or they're 3-7-1. They're always out there. And I think the final drive of that game on Monday is the exact epitome of that. Did they even really, they didn't need that drive. They didn't care. Like, they're not going to win the game, right? Like, they had made decisions previously in the game that they were not going to win that game, right? But you still have guys like Richard Rodgers out there diving to the ground to make an insane one-handed catch for a touchdown that was completely meaningless. And, for people that are betting and they wasn't meaningless for that. But that's my point. So you can say what you want. It's really easy to be not easy to be a middle school coach or a high school coach, but easier than in the sense of it's really simple to get a bunch of children and teenagers to buy into what you as an adult have to say and your philosophy. It's very difficult to get a bunch of grown men making millions and millions of dollars with millions and millions of dollars worth of ego attached to them as well, to always be bought in to what you're doing and always be giving 110% regardless of the situation they're in.
Yeah.
And that has continued, Frank Reich or not. So we can talk about Frank Reich and his offensive scheme, this, that, or the other thing, but at the end of the day, I think Doug Peterson is one hell of a coach. And one thing that everyone's always said about him is he is an unbelievable leader of men. So regardless of what's going on the field in the front office, one thing we're not seeing players quit. Now, could that be different if the NFC East was a little bit different and they weren't one game out of first place at, 3-7-1? Maybe. But it's things as simple as like, we give JJ Arcega-Whiteside like a hard time all the time, but you get a guy like that who's blocking 70 yards down the field when Miles Sanders fumbles the ball to make sure that that's a touchdown against the Ravens and not a touchback and they get the ball instead. It's little things like that really I attribute to the way Doug Peterson leads his players. And that's not something that, we should have kept Frank Reich can take away from him.
No, and I guess like there have been plenty of coaches in the NFL who are good coaches that are not good play callers. And I think that's what Doug is. I think Doug is a good coach who needs a guy around him from a scheme fit. And that's fine.
He needs a guy who's not a yes man.
What's that?
He needs a guy who's not a yes man.
Yes,
exactly. If Mike Crow was a yes man, Press Taylor's a yes man. He needs a guy who's going to give him a little bit of conflict to ultimately come up with the best decision. And that's what they did.
Now, I'll say, all I will say is that my opinion jumps greatly to the other side if Doug Peterson gets into this mindset of, no, I'm calling the plays or I'm leaving. Well, if that's the case, I'm sorry. I'm okay moving on from that.
But he's also said, I'll give it up. I just think he's not going to outright say, I'll give it up, but let me pick a damn offensive coordinator and someone that's competent enough to do this shit with me.
Right.
Like, that's what he's not. I think it says a lot about Doug Peterson that he's like, yeah, I'll give it up. Yeah, it's on the table. Apparently, he's already started to dole out some play calling duties going into this week against Green Bay. I just think that like Howie has the little guy's got too much power.
The weasel.
It's really, really, really starting to get under my skin. And I told you, my season, like this season started, I'm in this like never-ending loop of like, okay, Howie put together a garbage roster. Doug Peterson is not calling the right plays for said roster, and Carson Wentz is not executing the plays regardless. But that's because he doesn't trust the guys around him that Howie Roseman put in front of him, which is a terrible roster that Doug Peterson is not using correctly. That like that's the loop that I'm going in.
Yeah.
And it starts with Howie.
Right.
You know.
Well, listen, before we end the show, I got a couple questions. We'll pose them. We'll see what we think. If multiple firsts were offered by the Culture Carson, do you consider it? No, I don't consider it. They may, but it doesn't matter because the money still doesn't work. So that's why I don't think.
It's just like you're regardless of the record, like you're not far off. You know what I mean? Like, and we talked about this last year. There are holes in the offense. You're not starting from scratch. Trading Carson Wentz would be quite literally sending us right back to like New York Jets status right now.
Yeah.
And we're not there yet. Like
right.
We're still a mid-tier team. The schedule or the record does not tell the whole story right now. Fill the proper gaps instead of clowning around and drafting quarterbacks for no reason, and build a legit team for once.
Right. That's the fight I got in Monday night with this moron who came on and said the Eagles need to draft Kyle Trask, quarterback from Florida, in the first round. I was like, I'm not talking to you. You're an idiot. Great question here.
You don't watch the Eagles. Just
great question here. Does Kelsey play another year? Man, what a warrior he is. I just don't know if he's got another year in him.
If he chooses to go,
yeah, you can't be mad at it.
No, I won't be. He's an absolute animal. Can you imagine not being able to like snap your helmet to get and you're out there blocking an enormous human in front of you?
Yeah, that's insane.
Those are the things I love to see.
Chris was also very impressed with your rant, Jess.
Thanks.
Elite level rant.
Thank you.
All right. And then as Amadeo said, the intern has too much power.
Too much power.
Listen, people don't want to bring this up, and I do all the time. Let's not forget who Howie learned from. He learned from the other weasel that used to be in that same role. His name was Joe Banner. Okay? Joe Banner was the smartest guy in the room. It's that, inferiority complex of really small human beings. Oh, we're really small, but if we got the power, we're going to show you how big our brains are. I'm telling you, that's what it is. And
I wasn't old enough to pay enough attention to Joe Banner.
Oh, I was plenty old enough to have him literally say the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over and expect different results. And they continue to do the same thing over and over. Like, it was like, what are you doing? But, we shall see. So, Jess, you're picking the Eagles to beat the Packers this weekend?
Hell yeah, I'm picking the Eagles to beat the Packers this weekend. You're damn right I am.
If the Eagles throw the ball over 40 times, they will lose by 30. If they do not throw the ball over 40 times, they actually try and sustain a running game against a really bad rush defense, well, maybe they hang around a little bit. But you ain't going to get my ass to pick them to win another game until they actually win another game.
I will pick them to win every week. I told you, they could be 0-15 in week 16. I'm still picking that dub. I'm going to do it. That is my brand.
So, with that, we want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Thank you, Donald. Same to you. All right. What's this say? Joel might tweet, go, Pack, go.
You're too.
Put on fire.
He's been a Packers fan like forever.
Yes.
Like he came over. I don't know why, but why not? Like that's just kind of been his thing. The man was at the Super Bowl singing the Eagles fight song. If you go back and watch your Super Bowl DVD, I might do that.
Maybe better than watching the actual Eagles.
I was just saying I might do that soon to just make myself.
The greatest Merrill Reese line of all time. Next week, the Eagles travel to Lambeau Field to play the Green Bay Packers. Parental discretion is advised, was Merrill Reese's quote at the end of the game Monday night. Well played. But we thank all of you for tuning in. We will be back next week. We thank the Painted Lines. Make sure you're subscribing. Jess, plug Babes on Broad before we go.
Ooh, okay, multiple things. So, Babes on Broad, we have a fundraiser going right now. You can go to our Twitter, Instagram, anywhere you'll be able to find it, or search Babes on Broad at or on bonfire.com. We have all different kinds of items: crew neck sweatshirts, shirts, kid sizes, the whole nine. Cute little bobblehead logo of me and Sam. But all the proceeds from that fundraiser will go to Phil Abundance, which will help provide meals this holiday season for people who need help and are hungry in Philadelphia. So also, if you would like to purchase an extra clothing item for donation to somewhere like CHOP or Cradles to Crayons, something like that, send us an email, babesonbroad@gmail.com, and then we'll be back on Sunday at some point. We haven't decided if we're going to do like right leading up to game time, because we haven't had 4:00 game yet. So this is a whole different animal. We haven't decided if we're going to do right leading up to game time or our regular time at 11:45 for a pregame show, but we will be back on Sunday for a pregame show at some point in time.
Very good. Good cause. Get out there, support Babes on Broad and their fundraiser going on. As for me, you can catch me with the Party on Broad guys. We will be doing a live reaction show this week. I will be a part of it at some point. 4:00 afternoon, tough with a bunch of kids running around, but I will be a part of it at some point to sink my negativity into your wonderful viewing pleasures. And then obviously me and Jess will be back with the madness again next week. And then I might have a little something else in the works. All right. We got a couple little things going on where if you really enjoy just listening to me go off for 10 to 15 minutes, you may really like what might be coming your way very soon. All right. So for Jess, for me, myself, thank you. Have a great week. Embrace the madness, everybody.